Okay, now the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial has wrapped up for the week just a short while ago. The court heard further testimony today from Sergeant Patrick Mthethwa, who was on the scene of the crime on the day the former Bafana Bafana and Orlando Pirates captain was killed. The defense has largely tried to discredit the sergeant as incompetent. Our reporter, Silindelo Masikane, following this trial for us, was in court again today with the proceedings. Let's cross back to her now, just to move on with the story as we further unpack what happened in court. Silindelo, good afternoon once again. Well, the court has adjourned until Monday when it will proceed. And as you said, we expect a new state witness to take the stand come Monday.
We are expecting a new witness to take to the stand on Monday, Dan. We've just concluded the testimony of Sergeant Patrick Mthethwa, who was the state's second witness and one of 4 police officers that was first on the scene when it was reported to the police. Now, for some analysis in terms of the testimony this week, in particular in terms of Sergeant Mthethwa's testimony, I'm joined by legal expert Mr. Marius du Toit. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, as always. And just to give our viewers some legal perspective, now we've heard from the testimony of Mthethwa, 2 statements were put to him where neighbors who were there on that evening have actually said that the crime scene was not only contaminated but actually cleaned. There was water found on the floor, cans were dispersed of, and this all happened after the crime scene was actually not secured. Just how material are these findings or these statements to this court case?
Silindelo, I was unable to hear that question. Can I please ask you just to repeat that for me? They've just restored the sound when you logged off your question. My apologies.
No problem, Mr. du Toit. I was just saying that we heard from 2 witness statements that were read during cross-examination of Sergeant Mthethwa, where they say that the crime scene was essentially cleaned. Neighbors came in and mopped the floors. Cans were removed. Just how material or significant will these statements be for the trial?
Yeah, Silindelo, it's lovely speaking to you again. Yeah, that is extremely detrimental to the state case. The difficulty that you have is the moment a crime scene was not preserved, and even worse than that, the moment the crime scene was cleaned and the exhibits were removed, it opens the doors, number one, to say that there was tampering with the evidence. It opens the door to make it impossible to draw inferences from items that were found, because we simply don't know if it was the person that cleaned the room that would perhaps left a cigarette butt there. It opens the door to all sorts of allegations, and it's definitely not ideal for the state. I think if you rely on forensic evidence on a crime scene that's being tampered with, because that's what we know now, it makes it virtually impossible to draw inferences. And I think the state will definitely, if that is in fact the position, the state would have difficulty relying on some forensic evidence that was gathered from the crime scene, having regard to the fact that somebody tampered with. And let me just say, if somebody intentionally came to clean the crime scene, that is, of course, defeating the ends of justice, because the course of justice is interfered with if you clean a crime scene. You know, you could affect the ability of the state to investigate crimes. So the person who did this, of course, runs the risk of being charged for the offense, but that's only if it's intentional. If it was done negligently, well, that's a different story. Then the person would have a defense to that. But if it wasn't done intentionally, then absolutely that person should be charged with defeating or obstructing the course of justice.
Mr. du Toit, let's also just elaborate on the exhibits that were found at the crime scene. We now know that there was a bullet that was found behind the glass jars on top of the kitchen countertop, And what the defense has been trying to show, I think, with the issues around contamination, is that they are trying to show the court that there's a possibility that the bullet that was found behind those jars may have been planted. How difficult is this going to be? How difficult will the defense find it to actually prove this?
Yeah, in order to succeed with the planting of bullets, what you are saying is people are deliberately conspiring to plant evidence implicating me. So the first question would be is where would they get these spent cartridges, or where would they get these spent bullets? In what sense could this have been planted and linked to an accused? If any accused alleges that, I think the difficulty is to get everybody to be part of that conspire or conspiration. I mean, you're talking here about a number of people having to work together. So conspiracy is, it's easy to allege, but it's not so easy to prove a conspiracy. And you would need the people that alleges that it was found there. You would need the fact that they obtained it somewhere. You would need other people that specifically participated in this conspiracy. So I can't see how that would succeed, in all honesty, Silindelo. But definitely the state would have difficulty drawing inferences from spent cartridges found on the scene if other people entered the crime scene afterwards, unless they are able to call those people to testify to say, listen, I cleaned the crime scene in the bona fide belief that I need to do it, but I never touched these items, they were there. Then the court would have to draw inferences from the fact that they were left there and nobody else tampered with them. Because remember, the moment you're relying on an inference, remember, I can only ask the court to rely on an inference if it's the only reasonable inference consistent with all the facts, so as to exclude all other reasonable inferences. So it must be the only reasonable inference. So if I say it was planted there, then I'm basically saying to the court, that is the inference I want you to draw. And how does that exclude other inferences that it was in fact left there by the criminals? It's not so easy. So I don't see that necessarily flying, Silindelo, but the state would definitely have an uphill battle to try and convince the court that those items were in fact left there by the criminals themselves.
Lastly then, Mr. du Toit, let's look forward to Monday, where we're expecting the state's third witness. I have it on good authority that we are expecting someone who was in the house on the night of that shooting. It seemed, I don't know if I'm maybe mistaken in terms of the state's strategy, but we were expecting that we were going to get more expert witnesses, possibly ballistics. Is this a change in strategy? Can we infer anything from the fact that we are now going to hear evidence from those who were in the house?
Silindelo, I don't think you can read too much into that. You know, the difficulty is you're talking here about a matter that's on a continuous court roll. So you're talking about a trial that starts maybe on Monday, this past Monday, and maybe it's going to run for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And your witnesses aren't necessarily available on all dates. You might find that your eyewitness is only available on Monday and maybe Friday. And you might find your ballistic expert is testifying in vereniging on Monday and Tuesday and is only available Wednesday. So presenting evidence for the state has some practical problems. That means that they need to, try and juggle all the witnesses to make sure that all the witnesses get a reasonable opportunity to testify, because you don't want to irritate your witnesses by having 50 witnesses sitting outside the court and they just pickle along every single day unto the next day. So you try and accommodate your witnesses because they are doing you a favor to come and testify, especially if they are members of the public. So you don't want to unnecessarily irritate them or just waste their time. So you try and be as accommodating as much as possible, but having regard to the fact that you must prove the elements of the crime and you must prove all the evidence that you want to adduce. So I would imagine you can't read too much into that in isolation. I just think the state is maybe presented with some practical difficulties and they're trying to find useful solutions for it by maybe calling a witness on a Monday and maybe a forensic expert or ballistic expert on the Tuesday or the Wednesday.
Understood. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. As always, that is legal expert Mr. Marius du Toit, just unpacking the testimony of Sergeant Mthethwa and what's come out of it. Bradan, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Silindelo Masikane, for that analysis there with Mr. Dutoy there about what transpired in court today in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. The trial will resume on Monday.